And if you ride horses, we're on the expecting horse, and we're gonna visit some great destinations. One and two of those are a state of mind that gives us power, strength, and capacity over our emotions, and we hope that it helps us to harness and manage our fears, our anxieties to the point that we're in control. So we have. I mean, you guys are amazing, and how I'm planning to do this is we've got our keynote, Richard Morden, who is a pronounced and renowned speaker about emotional intelligence. We have some other people joining us, but yeah, you can tell Richard is, look at that logo. I mentioned it a minute ago. Time sweeps. And it does. I mean, and the thing about time is that we do not and will not and don't want to get carried away in the process of the time sweeping. So I introduce to some and present to others Mr. Richard Morden, and we're so happy to have him with us. And interesting story, and please just bear witness and listen, and we will renounce and also respond in a collective manner with all of our guest presenters too. So Richard, come, you're open. Share, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I'll do a little quick intro in a sense of what started this emotional journey for me. So we all have events. We all have lots of stories, but I just say the turning point for me is, I'll just go, one moment I was a husband and a father. The next I stood in a silent house, my wife suddenly gone. Two grieving teenagers looking at me for strength I didn't have. Growing up with a father who wielded criticism like a butcher's knife, I'd learned to bury emotions deeper than an old family well. Shame was my first language, silence was my suffering. When I discovered EFT, emotional freedom technique, I was desperate to find something, anything that would help me be what my children needed. What I didn't expect was how much I needed healing myself. Layer by layer, this technique helped me let go of decades of buried anger, shame, and trauma that had been running my life, secret life of pain and anger. The revelation and transformation that changed everything, that even understanding that I was carrying these hidden wounds are appearing functional to the world. How many others were silently suffering? Today, I guide others through the same healing, from emotional suppression to authentic living. What began as a personal survival has become my deepest calling, helping others transform their invisible pain into their greatest strength. When we talk about emotional intelligence, for many of us, it's a completely foreign land, because we don't have the physical ability to even be there, or the mental capacity. When you, I think, understand, many of us experience traumas and traumatic events. That weekend, I took the 3-day training. I was there I thought I'd be helping with my grieving wife after a 20-year marriage. I had 2 traumas surface in a weekend that I had no idea even existed. Plus, in a sense, up until 2020, I had buried 11 family members. Suicide and cancer. Watched my mom have a long journey with cancer, sat by her bedside for 9 months when I was 20 to watch her die. My brother committed suicide, and that was one of the traumas. The other one was some event with my father. I had no idea what it was. So again, these impact your nervous system in a sense of that contraction. So you don't have the frequency of the bandwidth when you're in those sympathetic events for your system to hold higher frequencies. So as much as we try and have emotional intelligence, and again, to the outside world, no one knew. And to most people, especially wartime people who have a generation of military, like they talk 7 generations of trauma carried into our system, that's how many multiples of that impact us and surface unknowingly through our systems and impair our functionality. So people say they can't do something, they can't become something. I mean, there is no capacity for it in many ways. So the words and language aren't necessarily going to do it. It needs, in my world, physical processing. So the tapping is a big part of that. And when I spent that weekend, I spent another year trying to find some people to actually practice with. And then I found another mentor, Nancy Forrester, and spent 8 months in her course. He was also a psychotherapist. And that was when I really started to unpack my journey of how to emotionally be available for myself first. And this is what I teach ultimately is self-care. I started looking after myself first, knowing that I needed that to be there for my kids as they were finishing high school, going off to college. And I'm blessed to say that it all worked. We had a good support system. My kids never missed a beat. Now they're adults. They have fully functional lives. But I did my part because I was there mentally, I was there emotionally, and I made myself sure I was there physically with them anytime they needed me. So allowed them to have, their grieving process and who they were. I allowed them to have that space and time. And I had discussions with them because when their mom died, I had her removed from life support. That was a decision I made at the time, and I had discussions with them after. So they were clear on the decisions I made as a parent and in this role to what, how they should see their life. But I wanted to make sure that they understood my choice at the time and what was available. And so, and that was a cleared path for me in that way. When we look at emotional intelligence, I mean, there's so many ways to look at a sense of the dialogue. People want to create dialogues, but if we don't have the physical range in our nervous system, we can't go into those really deep, intimate moments. Now, there may be others with more maybe wordsmithing I am that can help those people, but I look at the physical process. Can you do some tapping? Can you do some, point regulation? And there's different holds you can do. When I'm doing another technique, I'll talk about in a minute, I have people hold their arm here. And again, that allows them to regulate their nervous system. So it doesn't have to you don't have to sit there and talk about it and think. You can literally sit there like this and allow your system to calm down. And this, as I said, this is a very intense one here when you're doing this. I have people do this just to regulate themselves because that again starts to give bandwidth in your nervous system. So that allows capacity for us to have, again, a higher frequency of thoughts, because as much as we work on affirmations, if they're not available, if it's too contrary to our systems, they're not going to stay. Some part of my point when I'm talking about our regulation is admitting our truth to ourselves. And that's a big part of the EFT, because we do the setup and we're tapping. And then even though I have this thing, I deeply love and accept myself. And we'll test that and it'll be like, no way. So I talk about being in the truth of who you are in the moment, especially in these moments of frustration. So I say, I don't accept myself. And I mean, I'll take people right into the gutter with it because I did it myself. There's times you just literally hate yourself because you can't stand the frustration, and to me, you're just validating your own truth. It's not your permanent truth, a permanent. So, but I had to go through those layers myself. And one I love to talk about is the Chevy Chase rant, when you're really tapping and allowing yourself to purge. And whatever comes out of your mouth is okay, because you're releasing your frustration and your truth. Because in most emotional states, we can stay in the emotions of sadness or some sort of almost as despair and apathy, because we can't understand our own truth of our own anguish that's there. So that grief aspect is, again, what is it that's really at your core? I mean, I've worked with so many clients that couldn't acknowledge their own anger, their own frustration, because we were told, oh, you shouldn't be there, it's not nice. And I'm like, the heck with that. Like, let's go there. Because in that space of finding your own truth, underneath it all, it's one word, LOVE. That's who we are at our core. But sometimes we have to go through the layers of sadness and grief and others to find that, to be ourselves and be truthful to ourselves, who we are, because we're all good people. We've just had experiences, we've made strategies in order to compensate ourselves. We avoid things. We avoid, conversations. We avoid going into situations because we don't know what to do. And unfortunately, that was my father. He's a good man in many ways, but he avoided so much because he couldn't face those emotional aspects. He had no relationship with any of us. Therefore, how do we have a relationship? What really helped me was the fact that I had as much as the home life was frustrating, my working life was great, because I was a farm kid working for other people, and therefore I was respected, I was seen, I was heard. And there my voice was heard. And that was a good counter for me, because as I went into a full working career into a corporation after that, I allowed myself, I took on roles to expand myself. I took on roles to got involved with committees. I got involved in ways where I had to be up and more in people's faces, but also speaking. I went from a guy working by himself for years to all of a sudden I'm speaking to 50 people, 200 people, 500 people in morning meetings. Was I terrified? Absolutely. But I was able to stand there and everybody knew you're shaking like this, but I was able to come out and work on my voice. I was able to face those moments, but I had to do some work in the background to be there. So again, this emotional intelligence, and for many people don't realize how much we go into patterns of avoidance. And we don't even know we're doing it. We just don't go there. And that's where a lot of my work is. What are we avoiding? What are we not seeing that we can step into? And so my background is emotional freedom technique and also neuro-linguistic programming. But what I want to talk about is how I use this model called time sweeps, because it's a present time model we created. All our history is all in images. And that's from the Healing Code book and other people. So I've worked with a lot of other practitioners, a lot of other people that have way more experience than I do with this model, because I can address this with just a story in present time. I don't have to go and have somebody try and sit there and try and uncover a root cause or go back and look at how many generations back. I literally can just start with a topic. And what I want to really point out is we carry the energy of all the relationships in our body. I'm going to say that again. We carry all the relationships, the energy of our relationships in our body. When we change that energy, those relationships change. And I have two very good stories now, because when I was doing my EFT journey, working with one of my colleagues, 2015, I met with my colleague, and what do you want to talk about? He says, I was kind of stumped. I said, I have a boss who was micromanaging me. And wasn't a bad guy, but he's pretty, because he was pretty sharp. And I was, I had all these new roles. I was the safety facilitator, a bunch of stuff on the go. So I was pretty scrambly at the time. And I said, let's work on that. And then we just did some light tapping. And what came through was my dad's energy, because my dad was the, the authoritarian. And it wasn't hard. It wasn't very emotional. It wasn't very deep, but it was just kind of interesting, the feeling. Again, and the biggest thing with this work, I get people to connect to their body, start feeling their body, because most people are caught right in their head. And I've worked with people that I'm yawning because I'm processing for them, and I don't like to, but they're sitting there going, looking around because they've trapped themselves in their mind. And yet the body is the holder, a key for me of how we engage in the world. But that there, when we shifted that energy, and it was very light, very sort of, went on. When I went to work, I had a new relationship with my boss, and we never had a discussion. He just kind of shifted how he approached me, what he was saying. So that was my first awareness of how much we impact the world around us with what we carry energetically. How many people go into settings, and they're already geared up for they're some sort of frustration, family event, some sort of dialogue, or some sort of conflict. And because we're preparing for that, we don't really know how to go in there. So another story was when I worked with someone there in the UK a few months back. They were going to South Africa to visit family. There were some dynamics there. The mother-in-law was very influential in not such a great way. So we just worked on her energy around that, just for her calmness. But when they went there, that part of her mother-in-law never showed up. And even her husband was looking around and said, what did you do? So, and any time that they were going into a situation, one of the things I've learned over time is they're going into a family function there, and she would just say the word, this is the key one, barriers down, barriers down, barriers down. And that literally dropped the energy of anything, pretensions or assumptions they were having going into the family setting. And there's a video on that. So it's a real easy one to use, but you're going into this, and because we're going in geared up for the fight. Sometimes we're geared up for this, that's our lens of the world. But if we can just drop down into just being ourselves and being like I don't like, I'd say the word casual, an empty vessel, it's amazing what can happen. So the emotional intelligence, as much as there's so much language around it, and it's a beautiful word. I think Erin, if anybody saw Erin talk today, she was amazing. How she, used the words, and her gentleness was so powerful for that. And that's a powerful statement for that. But I'm going to say that we don't realize how much in emotional intelligence we're affected by the nuances of language, what we grew up with, the patterns of the the funny one was that people, like my father, you couldn't find something, and he would go into this sort of disgust of this contempt thing of, oh, and then he would say, it would bite you if it had teeth. And that was a regular occurrence. But you look and laugh at it now, by the time you're a kid, you're just like, oh, man, I can't do anything right. And how many of us have that? And the nuances of voice tone, voice inflection, tonality, pacing of the words and the language that have impact on us in conversations. How many of us had teachers that were quite degrading, quite humiliating? I've worked with people who had incredible impact in school, where a teacher had humiliated them over a math test or called them out over music or something else. And at the time, so, and those impact us for life. And we realize too that and this is the common frame out there, from 0 to 7 is the foundation of our life, of what those experiences are, how we see the world, because we're picking up emotions from the moment we're literally conceived into this world. We're impacted by everything around us. And what we see around us, those experiences like our anger, harshness, and whatever, we form what I call event moments in our life. And I've been doing a matrix printing, seeing people go back to age 3 or 4. And it's not a conscious decision, but the unconscious made such a decision at that time, it was still impacting them later on, like 50 and 40 years later. And what a lot of this is with the emotional intelligence part, is people have family dynamics that, the 5-year-old's fighting with the 10-year-old older brother, or the parents, there's dynamic. Those still play out 40, 50 years later. They're literally what I call a timestamp. And those sequences just keep playing out. And and it's still, you say, well, I'm a grown adult. One of my clients was a 72-year-old woman, and her mother's in her 90s. And after a day with her mother, she was fit to be tied, because it was the same dynamic playing over and over and over, because that energy cycle was still in her body and still in her system. So when we look at that, as what else is possible for us to change in our system in order for us to have a new relationship. So again, with the timesheets, it's present time, it's language based, and I literally start with a topic, and I just have people hold the wrist like that, a light hold. And from our previous dialogue, I start going through clearing statements and clearings, and a lot of it's intuitively. But my clearing statement is and whatever it is, I'll open all timesheets with this frustration with Ralph. And it goes through, because you understand the dynamics of most families, the baiting, the tactics, the narcissism. And I just say open, clear, delete. And when you do that, a lot of times, when I'm running through my head, I put some frustration on just whatever this is, open, clear, delete, open, clear, delete. I sometimes finger tap. I sometimes do a hold. I've got more words than that to this, but it's understanding that it gives me a chance to regulate without having to really try to, force my mind to do something, especially when you're new in this area too, because when you talk about all these, and they're all beautifully well done, but how long does it take to train your mind to do this? And if the nervous system is still unregulated, it's still going to impact you, because it might show up in many ways. But when you really get frustrated, I call it like when you maybe stub your toe or whack your shin on it, something like that. I say the mindfulness kind of goes out the window, because you're triggered by the emotion, by the frustration and all that sense. So again, a lot of stuff, again, it's for me, understanding the seethingness that was underneath me for all those years. Now, fortunately, it didn't show up in my real life. I was able to channel it different ways, but when I was in my 20s and 25, working on a farm, I broke a lot of stuff because that rage would just come out. So thankfully, I wasn't around a lot of people, but when I was married later, I was married at 36, so I had some awareness. And I also understood how I wanted to be, because I had another family that took me under the wing when I was 20, and they became a model for me of how I could be as a father and a husband. And I said, that's who I want to be. There's a lot of times with emotional intelligence, we don't have the model. We don't have anybody to look at for the guidance. I was very blessed to have guidance in my life, but I received them. I was very blessed to have a mentor in my life that was, a mentor for about 50 years that gave me an intelligence on somewhere to look at things. I said about reading a book. He said, great, what did it not say? And I said, what do you mean? He said, find some other books, start reading it, start comparing notes, have your discernment. That helped me think. That helped me have discernment and choice. So again, that was available to me, but I took advantage of it. I said, okay, I'll learn this. I'll accept guidance and I'll accept criticism. So I had enough awareness of that to be responsible for myself. And because one thing I give Dad credit, I couldn't get away with anything and nothing. He caught me on everything I did. So whenever I made a mistake, I'd own up to it right away. Yeah, I did it. And throughout my working career, if I messed something up, I owned up to it. Nobody ever gave me a hard time because I was being honest with the situation of myself. And I think I give credit for myself that I was being honest. I was being forthright with that. So with this model, I so enjoy the work with it because it can help people in the moment, but also help them uncover, because I'm working with a few other people, again, with narcissistic partners, and that's another whole lot of another whole situation, because there's so many nuances around that. But again, I'll end with this. When we shift our energies and what we're holding on to about relationships, those relationships open up to a whole lot more possibilities and a whole lot more availability for ourselves, but we become available for those relationships. So ultimately, what I teach everybody is self-care. Take care of you, then the world around you will start to respond accordingly, because we are the creators of our reality, and the reality is just giving us feedback. Thank you.
That was awesome, Richard. Thank you so much for that. You touched on a whole chasm of items that I don't know. I mean, you take it to another level almost in terms of emotionally. We're if you were to consider ourselves computer systems, and that we have the capacity to reset. Especially when the system could become overloaded or pushed beyond the capacity. And and emotions, I mean, they have the capacity to do that plus more. Now, our experiences and connecting. Once you connect to people, and there's a power and strength in your connection. I mean, that's it's amazing. So I know I could get, I've got a whole series of questions, but let me open up the floor to people who might have questions regarding what you've commented on, and because you still have the opportunity to display and present. Any questions? Any questions? Anybody got questions? Feel free. Feel free. Okay. Raise your hands on the screen so I'll know. Okay. Okay, I don't see any questions. So
All right.
you have a
So
question?
let everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll come back with the panel. So over to you, Dan. Dan plays a big role with EmpowerMen and emotional intelligence.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Richard, for speaking about that. It was very informative and moving. So yes, my name is Dan Aguilera. I'm a men's empowerment coach, and I coach single male entrepreneurs who are struggling in their dating lives. And I coach them through the process of modern dating, the challenges, the pitfalls, things that they don't expect, the things that go wrong, because dating has changed in our society over the past several decades. Social media, dating apps have led to a lack of long-lasting romantic relationships, fulfilling relationships, and partners finding other compatible partners. And this can be very discouraging. And entrepreneurs in particular feel discouraged because they're very outcome oriented. So when they don't get the outcome that they want, they feel that they're doing something wrong. They feel that they're worthless, and they start to take things very personally, and they become very discouraged to the point where they just want to give up on dating in general. And they think that's the proper solution. Compounded with that is social media, YouTube, a whole bunch of online content, which started out with good intentions, but it quickly became toxic with red pill content, and men trying to convince other men that it's just women who are the problem. Women have unrealistic expectations. You have to be the superhero in order to attract someone. So don't even bother. Just relax. Just be happy on your own. Go your own way, and just don't even bother with women. And that's been it's created a lot of polarization in the dating market in today's climate. So men now just don't know where to turn to. They're just feeling hopeless that they're never going to accomplish anything positive in their romantic life moving forward. So I have a 12-step program. My dating program is called Dating Mastery for Entrepreneurs. And we start out by defining what exactly they're looking for. What is their motivation behind dating? Because it is very important. It sets the mindset. It helps them overcome limiting beliefs, because again, with all the content and some books out there, it instills a lot of limiting beliefs as to what they potentially could attract and what would be good for them. So I help them overcome that. It's a question-based process because I want the answer to come from within them. A big part of my program is emotional intelligence. So it's understanding female psychology. It's understanding how to communicate with women, what they mean when they say certain phrases, how to communicate effectively. Because, let's face it, men tend to think and communicate very logically, whereas women think and communicate very emotionally. So that is often what causes fights and mismatches. And that's why men get very upset oftentimes. So what I help with that is I help them understand the meaning behind the words and emotional intelligence behind what they're feeling rather than what is physically being spoken. And through that, they start to open their mind and opens doors to their mind as far as how to communicate with women more effectively and how to have better dating experiences and maintain better relationships. But overall, the main goal of the program is to make it centered to themselves, and it's to develop their values, solidify their values, and set boundaries. It is not to cave on your values and feel that you have to compromise in order to find what you're truly looking for in a partner. So we list what is important to them, what is important in a potential partner for them, and what strategies we can implement, what changes we can make in order to find that type of person. It's often a time management issue because entrepreneurs are typically very busy men and they often don't have a lot of time to go out and date. As a result, they tend to attract emotionally detached women and they tend to ignore red flags. So we talk about their past experiences, both positive and negative, and we unpack it to understand what they can learn from it. And so from that, we build the strategies moving forward and overcome the discouragement, overcome the stigma and the negativity and the pain in order to move forward, in order to find what they're looking for, because staying home and being bitter and being angry is going to solve nothing. So the 12-step program, each module is based on a particular topic. However, I do tailor the program to each client's specific needs. So with that, it's all about what they're looking for. And like I said, it's question-based, and the outcome is to develop a better confidence and a more positive dating mindset. Because without that, you're going to struggle a lot. If you go into it just like with a business, if you go into the intention of it with, I don't think this is going to work out, why even bother? It's most likely not going to work out. So you're setting yourself up from disaster right from the start. So we take all that into account. We understand what they're looking for, and we just go through the process. And again, it's tailored to each person. And through that process, they overcome their limiting beliefs, negative beliefs, and I empower them to become better versions of themselves. So that's the pretty much sum up of my business. So I'm open to any questions if anyone has.
You only work with men?
Yeah, my niche is single male entrepreneurs in a bracket of like 20s and 30s right now.
Explore this prospect, because in that light, I mean, because life is about liberty, freedom, and exploration. And the more you are, how can I say, encumbered, or emotions can get the better of you to the point where you are restrained, and you run away from your emotions. Let me not deal with that. Let me not experience that. Let me not feel this way. Let me not and consider this to be forthright. That's one aspect of it. But really, at the end of the day, how can you reach a point where, oh, I've never felt that way before. Let me see what this is all about. And perhaps you find yourself stepping into a new room, and you are liberated because of that emotion. Like I can only imagine what it's like. Now these emotions on a more, I guess, experiential basis, but I can imagine what it's like to, let's take the emotion of embarrassment. And embarrassment can become, whoa, it's a powerful emotion, and you could reach a point where it's painful. is painful, especially as you remember it. And that could lead you to take all kinds of drastic action, but the whole idea is, well, if I felt that way, there's a reason. Let me find what's behind that and get to the bottom of it, because I don't like feeling that way. And I'm gonna find a way to not have that ever happen again. So I mean, and so the forum that we're here for is that how can we explore, consider, evaluate, and find the strength and the power to overcome them. So I see Linda coming up. She has something to say.
Yeah.
Okay, please. You've limited your mic.
Okay.
Uh.
Okay. I'm Linda Thompson. And can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can hear you, we can hear you.
Okay. And I just want to say, Richard, I think it's Richard that came on before him. He ended his speech with self-care. And I feel like we're beginning to take care of ourselves better. And I do know that that's something that men needs to do as well. And men are trying to get into that. So I'm glad you mentioned that towards the end. And Dan, your program, the 12 step, what you're doing, all about communication and all of that, that's very good, because men have been told for so long to, like when little boys, don't cry, be tough, and now you're trying to learn how to manage your emotions, and that's a process. So what you're doing is really well, and I think it's great what both of you are doing, because we need the men to understand us and not just do stuff for us, but do it for yourself. And no, I want to and first of all, we have to make a decision, just like the women, that I'm going to do better. I want to change. I'm not what I grew up or what I saw. So keep doing what you're doing. I really admire what both of you are doing.
Very good. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Also, Linda, can you tell us a little bit about the words? Because some of them will not be on tomorrow. Just a brief.
And also
something-
what you do.
Yeah, quick, and what you do and about your books.
Okay.
One sec, let me stop recording and I'll just start recording again.